Welcome back to Luke's Properties YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the 15 things I've had to unlearn to become successful. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Luke. Over the last 7 years, I've turned £6,000 in savings into a multi-six-figure rent-to-rent business. I've also built a buy-to-let portfolio that pays me passive income. The passive income from the rent-to-rent business and my investments means that I don't really need to work anymore. And if I wanted to, I could probably retire this year. I also teach people exactly how to do what I've done. So if you're interested in building a rent-to-rent business and buying buy-to-let properties, then you're in the right place. And you should subscribe to this channel. It will help you. So in this video, I'm going to cover the 15 things that I had to unlearn before I became successful. So we're going back 7 years now. So I'm going to take you back to 7 years ago when I decided I wanted to get into property. I only had around £6,000 in savings, so I didn't have enough to buy a property. And then I discovered a strategy called rent to rent, which allowed me to rent properties, give them a cosmetic refurbishment, and then re-rent them out for a premium. I'd pay the landlord their rent, I'd pay the running costs, and then the margin left over would be my profit. I did this over and over again, and by the end of my first year, I was making £5,000 a month in profit. By the end of my second year, I was making £10,000 a month in profit. I used the money from this business to start buying my own properties, and then I'd do the same thing. I'd furnish them and either rent them out on Airbnb or just rent them out to medium-term tenants with all the bills included as a furnished serviced accommodation. But before I did all of this, I had to unlearn some things that I'd been taught from school, from my parents, from society. And in this video, I'm going to cover those 15 things with you and save you some time. So if you unlearn these things now, it will give you the mindset shifts that you need to succeed in a shorter amount of time than I did, because I didn't know this stuff, and you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of the things that we're taught when we're younger, they don't actually apply anymore in today's world. They're just not relevant. So rather than learning new things, which you do need to do too, you also need to unlearn certain habits, certain tactics, and some myths that just aren't relevant in today's world. So the first thing I had to unlearn is that money is evil. Growing up, we're kind of taught that money is evil, and in all of the films or the cartoons, the person with all the money is some sort of evil villain. And this just isn't true. Money is just a tool. It's a neutral resource. And depending on how you use it, I guess, defines whether you're good or evil. Money tends to flow to people who solve problems and add real value to the world. The more people you help, the more money you earn. It's that simple. The more money I've earned or created, the more jobs I've created. So I've been able to employ people and allow them to make money. I've been able to employ my spouse, so she works within my businesses and she doesn't need to go and work a 9 to 5 anymore. I'm about to have my first child and I'm going to be able to be a very present dad, which I feel quite privileged to be. I'm not going to have to go and leave my child for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week to go and work for someone else. I can be present and I can really focus on raising a quality human being. So in my experience of money, the more money I've earned, the better man I've become. The more I filled my cup up, the more that's allowed me to pour into other people around me. Even making content for you guys now, I get to spend my time helping other people. I also teach people exactly how to do what I've done. So I get to share my success and help others grow. So money isn't evil. It's more about the person who has the money. Money simply amplifies who you are. If you're a good person and you make money, then you can be an even better person. If you are an evil, bad person and you somehow manage to make money, then that's just going to amplify who you are and make you even worse. But money itself is neutral. It's just a tool. So make sure you use it wisely. Money isn't something you should be ashamed of. You should want to make money, but not to spend on yourself, to use it to become abundant and help others around you. That's what money's for. The second thing I had to unlearn is that hard work equals success. Now, if hard work alone made you successful, then all the laborers, all the construction workers, well, they'd be rich because they work very hard, but they're not all rich. In fact, a lot of them are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, why is that? Well, success comes from working smart, not hard. Success comes from working in focused, highly leveraged ways. So for example, in my rent to rent business, I might work 1 hour a day on that business, but that business generates 5 figures a month for me. Initially, when I first started the business, I was working 3, 4, 5 hours a day to build the business. But once I'd built it, I hired employees, I built systems. So now that business works for me and makes money for me, rather than me having to trade my time, effort and energy to make money. So that's an example of a highly leveraged way of making money. Another example would be my buy-to-let properties. I've invested around £30,000 in each one of those properties. But once I've found tenants and I've rented the properties out, they pay me passive income while I'm asleep. I don't need to go and trade time for money. Again, my money is working hard for me, creating more money. This is another example of a highly leveraged way of making money. So it's not about working hard, it's about working smart. Hard work alone won't make you rich. Back in the industrial age, this was true. But in today's day and age, the information age, leverage is what sets you free. And smart, leveraged work will make you far more money with less effort than any hard work will. So remember, strategy over sweat and leverage over labor. The third thing I had to unlearn was that you must buy a home to be successful. And this just simply isn't true. The average deposit for a residential property in London is around £60,000. Most people save up for years and years to get this money together. In fact, most millennials can never save this amount of money. But the ones that do, they put all of their capital into their home. And that's their nest egg. And that's their method to getting rich later on down the line. But I would argue that that same £60,000 you could use to make a lot more money in a shorter amount of time. Let's say you started a business with that £60,000. You could certainly get a 5 or 10x multiple on that business in 3 to 5 years. You could turn that £60,000 into a £600,000 business by finding a problem that needs solving, by creating a service or a product that solves that problem, adding value to the marketplace, and then getting paid accordingly. So that's one way of making that money work harder for you than if you were to just put it into a residential property and wait until you're 60 to realize the capital appreciation. You could also use that same £60,000 to go and buy 2 buy-to-let properties. Those properties would pay you around £350 to £400 per month each in passive income, which works out to be around £700 to £800 per month. That's passive income in your pocket while you sleep every month forever. And then you'd have 2 assets appreciating in value. Also, the tenants pay the mortgage payment rather than you paying the mortgage payment. So you get 2 times the appreciation, you generate 2 times passive income, and other people cover the cost. No brainer. So those are 2 ways that money can work harder for you elsewhere rather than in your residential home. I've done this myself. I built businesses and bought assets rather than buy an expensive residential property. And most of my peers who bought a house in London, well, they're financially stuck now and they're all working a 9 to 5 or they're self-employed and they're stuck paying an expensive mortgage when they could have used that same capital elsewhere to build a business or to buy-to-let properties that pay them passively. So you don't have to buy a home to be successful. You could use that same capital to make more money elsewhere and just rent where you live. There's nothing wrong with renting. If you're making more money elsewhere, then renting is intelligent. The next thing I had to unlearn is that money is for spending. When I was in my 20s, I used to think I should make more money so I can spend more money and buy more nice things, have more nice experiences, and the more money I made, the more I could spend. But that isn't what you should be doing with money at all. It wasn't until I started my first business in my late 20s that I realized that money is a resource to multiply, not to satisfy ego or impulsive decisions. See, wealthy people use money to build or buy assets that make more money, i.e. a business or investment properties that they can rent out. Spending is what keeps people broke. Investing is what makes people wealthy. So money isn't for spending at all, it's for investing. The 5th thing I had to unlearn was that you should earn more money. Well, that's not true at all, because the more you earn, the more tax you pay. See, business owners and investors legally pay less tax through smart structures, whether that be limited companies or trusts or assets that they can borrow good debt against tax-free. Business owners and investors may not earn more money on paper, but they create more money in savvy structures that allow them to pay less tax. Business owners have tax-deductible expenses, and they can use these expenses to reduce their profits on paper and pay less tax. Employees and self-employed people, they don't have the privilege of tax-deductible expenses because self-employed people rarely have many employees that work for them. They don't spend much money on things like marketing, so they generally don't have many deductible expenses to offset their profit. And employed people, well, they get taxed before they even receive their salary. It's already been taken out of their account by the time they get their payslip. Salaries are taxed first. Businesses get to spend first, then get taxed later. The 6th thing I had to unlearn was that you need to work until you're 67 and then retire on your pension. Well, this is completely false. You can retire in 5 years if you play the game right. I could retire today if I wanted to. I have enough passive income from my buy-to-let investments to live off. I also have enough income from my businesses to live off too. And I only work a couple hours a day, if that. I mainly make videos and content to educate other people and market my services. But a normal day for me consists of exercise, reading, listening to podcasts, making some content, and spending time with my loved ones. And I'm only 36. I started building my first business around 7 years ago. And 5 years into that journey, I had enough income coming in from my business and my investments that I didn't need to work anymore. But I do still choose to work because I enjoy what I do now. And it's on my terms, not someone else's. So it feels like fun rather than a chore. And that's the position that we should all be aiming to get to. We only get one life. We shouldn't be spending all of our time working, especially for someone else. And certainly if you're not enjoying it. Why would you compromise your own happiness for someone else? As I said, we only get one life, so you should make it your own. So by doing smart business and making savvy investments, and by having discipline, you can retire in 5 years too, rather than spending 40 to 50 years in a job. You don't need to work until you're 67. You can retire in 5 years. With smart, savvy work, with the correct investments, and by maintaining discipline, you can win a lot sooner. The seventh thing I had to unlearn was that school teaches you to be successful. Now, this simply isn't true. I personally believe that school teaches you to be an obedient worker, not a free thinker. We're in the information age now. We're not in the industrial age. So everything that school teaches you is obsolete now. It's irrelevant because the old rules don't apply in today's world. I got kicked out of school in year 9. I think I was around 13 or 14. And for so many years, I felt like a failure. I felt like I had done something wrong. I felt like I just didn't fit in. I could never focus in school. But now that I've made a success of myself, hindsight is a beautiful thing because I now realize that I wasn't a failure. The reason I couldn't focus was because my intuition was telling me something wasn't right and that there was more to life than sitting in a classroom all day with 30 other people being taught by someone who probably only earns around £30,000 a year. When you're ambitious and entrepreneurial like myself, you simply can't concentrate in those environments. Your brain's constantly thinking about new things, about ideas. For me back then, it was thinking about playing football, about girls, but I just couldn't sit still and be told what to do for hours on end. I'd get restless. I'd start making jokes. I always felt like I had to do more. I never felt like school was the right environment for me. And that's probably why I got expelled. But I'm pretty sure I'm more successful now than most of the high achieving academic students in school. So if things didn't work out for you in school, that doesn't mean you're not going to be a success. It might mean you're an entrepreneur like me rather than an employee. So that's something to think about. The 8th myth I had to unlearn was that you should balance everything. And this just simply isn't true. I've had periods in my life where I've had to focus on building my business, on building my personal brand, on buying assets. And because of this focus, I haven't been able to be the best friend. I haven't been able to be the best socialite. I haven't been able to be the most present family member because I've been so focused on my mission. And it's very difficult to balance everything. Something will always fall by the wayside. If you have goals and ambitions, you need to focus on achieving those things. Your mission becomes first priority. So this whole idea of work-life balance, it just isn't realistic. You can't be everything at once. You have to choose what you want to do, where you want to be in 5 years' time, and then focus every day on doing the things that are going to get you there. And that can mean saying no to things, missing out on certain motives, not going to the party, not going to the festival, not going on that holiday that all the boys are going on. You have to make sacrifices. Mindless parties, mindless socializing, these things take away from your energy, the same energy that you should be focusing on your mission. You can't be a full-time socialite and a full-time entrepreneur. The two just don't mix. Time is the ultimate currency. Rich and wealthy people use it to build, not escape. So balancing everything is a myth. Focusing on one thing is how you succeed. The 9th thing I had to unlearn was caring what people think. Going back to my early 20s, I used to care so much what other people thought of me. I was so conscious of other people's opinions. Then when I started my first business, I quickly realized you can't build something real if you're worried about other people's opinions. When I started my first business, I had to face rejection, public embarrassment, and public failure. I got told no by so many estate agents, rejected by so many landlords, and that hurt my pride and ego at the time. Had I cared what people thought about me, maybe I would have given up. but I was willing to fail in public and fail forward. I documented my whole journey. My growth came from doing, not always looking polished. Even growing my social media channels, my Instagram account, for example. When I look back at my first ever video, I was terrible at making content. Now, I'm not so bad, but I was willing to learn on the job. I was willing to make that first piece of content, even though I wasn't good at it. And then thousands of videos later, here we are. My audience didn't grow because I was perfect. My audience grew because I was consistent and authentic. Had I cared what other people thought of me, maybe I wouldn't have made all those pieces of content and I wouldn't be here today. So caring what other people think kills your potential. And if you're on your mission, you can't be focused on other people's opinions. The 10th thing I had to unlearn is that you must know everything before you start. This is a complete lie. You don't need to know everything before you start. You need to start and learn as you go. You need to learn just enough to make that first step and then let the rest unfold. Perfectionism is actually procrastination in disguise. Most people want to be perfect before they start. They want to have the perfect website, the perfect business cards, the perfect marketing, the perfect environment. All of this is procrastination. You need to know just about enough to give yourself a good start, and then you need to take that first step forward and learn on the job. Most people procrastinate, so much so that they never actually take that first step forward. This is why most people fail in business, because they're so scared to take that first step. They do all this other stuff before they take that first step, not realizing that all they're doing is procrastinating. Take that first step and learn on the job. Learn as you go. You learn so much more by doing rather than the theory. Clarity comes later down the line from taking action. You don't get clarity before you take action. So you must start making moves. Things will make sense as time goes on, but you must make that first step. The 11th thing I had to unlearn is that fear is a sign to stop. Well, this is completely untrue. Fear is actually the sign to move forward. Everything I wanted was on the other side of fear. When I think about my first ever rent-to-rent viewing, I remember driving to the viewing, I remember parking outside the property, and I remember feeling so scared to go into the property and speak to the landlord, I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. It took me 5 to 10 minutes to gather myself, to gather my thoughts, take a few deep breaths, and pluck up the courage to actually go into the viewing and speak to the landlord. I walked around for 5 minutes. I had a very brief conversation with the landlord, left him a leaflet and my business card, and then I left. All the terrible things that were going around in my head, paralyzing me before I got out of the car, didn't happen, and they were never going to happen. Fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear can play tricks on you. You need to be able to lean into the fear and do the thing you need to do anyway. Do it scared. Fear is just unfamiliar territory. It's not actual danger. What's the worst that can happen? Fear is an illusion. It's a mind trick. And if you can learn to overcome fear, you'll be successful in this life. It's normal to feel scared and fearful about doing something new, but the trick is to just do it anyway. You need to go through the fear, and on the other side of that fear is progress. The 12th thing I had to unlearn was that comfort equals success. This is a lie. See, growth requires discomfort, always. If you're too comfortable, then you're probably not progressing. And this is why a lot of people get stuck in the middle class, because they might be making 40, 50,000 pounds a year from their job. They might have a company car, a nice 3-bed terraced house. And for a lot of people, that's success. That's enough to make them comfortable. But if you're an ambitious person and you see yourself being a very wealthy person in your mind, and you dream of being able to achieve whatever you want to, then the 3-bed terraced house and the company Mercedes outside it just isn't enough for you. So you need to push past any comfort and get yourself used to being uncomfortable. If you're not being challenged, then you're not changing. Every time I felt uncomfortable, it's because I'm pushing myself and I'm learning new skills. If I'm feeling comfortable, then that means I need to start doing something else. I need to start pushing myself again. And comfort can creep in at any time. I'm relatively comfortable now. If I wanted to, I could stop working. I don't have to make content. I don't really have to run my businesses. I have a team of people that do that for me. I could go and sit on a beach somewhere for the whole year if I wanted to. But because I'm familiar with this process, whenever I feel like I could be comfortable, I push past that and start learning a new skill. I start making content. I start building my personal brand more. I start setting more goals. I try and buy more assets. Because the minute you feel comfortable and you put your feet up is when you're not growing. You're either growing and evolving, or you're eroding and dying. So always challenge yourself. Never get comfortable. Set new goals. focus on them, and push towards them. Then when you achieve those goals, set some more. Always stay in motion, always stay moving forward. The 13th thing I had to unlearn is that you need to be motivated. Motivation isn't what gets the job done. There's some days where I don't feel motivated at all, but I still do what I need to do because I have discipline. Discipline is far more important than motivation. There's going to be days when you don't feel like doing what you need to do, but discipline will pull you through. Motivation fades, but discipline builds empires. Over the last 7 years, I've built routines and systems that work for me, even when I didn't feel like it. And now, those same systems make money for me, so that I don't physically have to trade my time for money. This took 7 years of discipline, and now discipline is installed in me, to the point where even when I feel like having a day off, I very rarely do, because I have my routines and my habits that I stick to, that I know if I complete them, I'm going to have a good day. And life's about stacking the good days on top of each other. The more good days you can have, the better months you can have. The more good months you have, the better year you have. And then over a long enough time horizon, 5 years, 10 years, you succeed. And you're so much further ahead than all of your peers because you remain disciplined and you done what needed to be done. So you must develop discipline. Motivation can be up and down. Discipline will pull you through over the long term. The 14th thing I had to unlearn was that success is linear. Now, growing up, I used to think that success looked like this. Just straight up. Oh, how wrong I was. When I started my first business, I soon realized success doesn't look like that. Success can be up, it can be down, it can be up again, it can be down again. But what happens is, over the long term, the trajectory is still up. But there's peaks and valleys, there's the top of the mountain, and then there's the valley of despair. And to be successful, you have to experience both. But as long as you keep going, over the long term, when you zoom out, the long-term trajectory is still up. Success isn't a straight line. It's messy and chaotic and full of detours. The trick is to stay committed and always move forward. Even when it feels like you're stuck, you're never stuck. You're just at a bottleneck and you need to focus on the exact thing that will help you get past that hurdle. Once you get past that hurdle, or you work out a way around it or through it, then you're off again, moving forward and on the rise. But success is not a straight line. It's not straightforward. It's full of ups and downs. The sooner you learn that, the better. Don't expect things to be easy because they won't be, and you'll be in for a rude awakening. Things don't get easier. What actually happens is you get better at handling objections, at handling obstacles. Your skills improve, and then as a result of that, you're able to maneuver, figure things out quicker, and you start to pick up speed and momentum over time. But it never gets easier. You just get better. And the 15th thing I had to unlearn is that I needed everyone to support me. This just simply isn't true. See, most people won't understand your journey, and that's okay. Choosing the path of entrepreneurship is off the beaten track. It's not the norm. So when you tell people about what your dreams are, what your goals are, when you tell people about this business idea that you have, most people won't understand it. They may even discourage you and say things like, that's not going to work, or why don't you get a job? I can't see it working. Things like that. And that's fine, because the opinions of others is irrelevant. And most people choose the path of safety, of comfort. Most people work a 9 to 5 because that's what everyone else does. And that's what they've been taught in school, to trade time for money. But if you're an entrepreneur and you have a big vision and a big dream of running your own business, of working on your own clock, then most other people just aren't going to get that because they're not entrepreneurs. And that's fine. There's billions and billions of people in the world who will buy from you if you create a valuable service or product. You don't need your mum, your dad, your 5 friends to support you or understand what you're trying to do because they're irrelevant. This is your journey, your path, and there's billions and billions of other people all over the world who will value your service or product. You just have to build it and market it well, and they will come. You don't need a pat on the back from mum or dad. You don't need your 5 friends to buy your product or service. There's billions of other people who will. You don't need cheerleaders. You need results. And this is something I know to be true. So stop looking for validation from friends and family. Just build the thing. Build it well, market it well, and go out there and offer it to the world. I promise you, if you do a good job, people will buy from you. So these are the 15 things I had to unlearn, guys. These are the mindset shifts I had to have before I achieved success. So I wanted to share these things with you so that when you embark on your own journeys, you can reference this video, you can watch it back, and hopefully it gives you some comfort and a higher understanding of the person you need to be to become successful. A lot of the things we've been taught growing up just aren't true. And if you can shift your mindset to think more like this, then I promise you, success will follow. Once you make your mind right and you're thinking at the correct frequency, everything else becomes easier. So this has been the 15 things I had to unlearn to become successful. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.